My name is ZX. I'm very excited to be here. I work on crypto economics and Falcon Ecosystem at Protocol Labs. Today, I just want to share with you like some of these new ideas around like business opportunities on Filecoin, because a very common question I get from developers and entrepreneurs in the Web3 ecosystem, they often ask me, hey, we are really interested in building on the Falcon ecosystem, but there are so many opportunities. Where do we start, right? So I hope to provide some ideas and directions in terms of like opportunities that we should explore as an ecosystem. And I'm very excited for this hackathon because I hope many of these ideas can be explored. I think to catch up on what is Filecoin, and we should probably start from Airbnb. And to try to understand the business model of like what's building on Filecoin. Airbnb did NASDAQ listing last year, and they did this pretty interesting thing where they offer, I think, 70% of their shares for purchase to the early hosts on Airbnb. So while this is a pretty commendable effort from like a traditional Web2 platform economy, but if looking at it from like taking a step back, looking at overall platform economy in the Web2 sense, many of this value that's being generated by the providers on the platform, they're mostly being captured by the shareholders of the company. And I think with Web3, there is an opportunity for us to really change this kind of economic structure. And I think hosting Airbnb itself carries lots of similarity with mining on Filecoin. Both of them, on Airbnb as an Airbnb host, you contribute housing resources, and as miner on Filecoin, you contribute cloud resources. Being a host is labor intensive. Being a miner, however, is knowledge and technology intensive. As a host, you're at best a contractor, but for Filecoin, as a miner, you are an owner of the network. And Airbnb is being managed by a company, and where Filecoin is governed by a decentralized ecosystem. In terms of dispute resolution, you have to go to legal recourse on Airbnb, but there's crypto economic mechanism, social consensus, community governance on Filecoin. But there are some similarity as well. I think like both hosts, Airbnb and providers on Filecoin share this brand identity with the platform, right? And people compete both within the ecosystem and outside the ecosystem, like Airbnb with hotel chains, through differentiated services. It's not really about price, right? Maybe to start, price could be competitive, but really people compete on differentiated services. And this is why hackathons, accelerators, startups, and so on are so important to our ecosystem, because developers build this kind of differentiated services on top of the Filecoin protocol. With this in mind, in hindsight, actually, like Filecoin mining is a lot similar to hosting on Airbnb compared to like a traditional Bitcoin, Ethereum style mining, because we're doing useful work. We are providing miners are both maintainers of the blockchain, also providers of the services on the platform. And this really paved the way for mainstream adoption for blockchain as a whole through doing like useful work that has like business value and business impact. And so in some way, we can think of Filecoin as an Airbnb for cloud services, but it's also a lot more than that, which we will talk about in a moment. So just to recap what is Filecoin, so that we start on the same page, you have different participants in this ecosystem. You have clients looking to consume storage goods and services. You have miners providing that service, also maintaining the consensus on the blockchain. Then you have developers building like products and experience on top of this platform. And then you have token holders doing investment, providing liquidity, supporting everyone in the ecosystem, and the ecosystem partners collaborating with the ecosystem very deeply to really push the boundary forward. And going back to our island economy analogy, right? So like you have researchers building on the algorithm, then you have like miners amassing these different kinds of raw materials like disk, IDCs, data centers, compute, and so on to produce storage related goods and services. Then you have developer coming on to build that experience, right? And then you have token holders providing like liquidity, loans, collateral, and so on and so forth. And overall goal for everyone in the ecosystem is to attract more potential clients and participants to join the Filecoin economy. So Filecoin is a utility token, it's a platform, it's a protocol, it's a blockchain network, a community, an economy, an ecosystem, and also very importantly, an evolutionary system, just like many other blockchain networks. And we coming together to really move and shape the future trajectory of this economy. And with this in mind, I think Filecoin is really uniquely positioned in our Web3 to support both Web2 and Web3 use cases. we start from talking about business opportunity from like a more Web2 style interactions, and then we talk about what are the Web3 use cases that are emerging on Filecoin. So let's just recap again on like what is using storage on Filecoin mean, because sometimes when we come from like a traditional Web2 world, we might expect things to just work out of the box, right? It's a product, you should just, there's one way of working how it works, right? But no, Filecoin is a protocol just like Ethereum and many others. There's no a single defined way of how the interaction should be done, right? It only cares about the basic building block as a layer one. And then the rest is all emergence and up to the creativity, entrepreneurship of developers and founders building on the ecosystem. So when miners are providing storage on Filecoin, they are proving their storage in this notion of a sector. It's like a shipping container, and then they can put different content in the container. And then the blockchain will come around every day asking the miner, hey, do you have the data that you promised that you are storing? And yes or no, right? They have to pass through certain checks. So using storage on Filecoin really is using storage provided by miner providers on the Filecoin network. So from this kind of mental model, right, like the redundancy, encryption, indexing, fast retrieval, warm pod storage, these are all possible on the Filecoin network today. And you just maybe because it's only 6 to 7 months old, you need to find the right provider to provide to have the right SLA and provide the right level of service. And looking at this dashboard, we can actually see that the storage cost on Filecoin today is actually quite competitive. It's only 0.3% of AWS. But I want to emphasize this point earlier, that I mentioned earlier, just like Airbnb, it's not just about cost, right? Well, I think cost is a given, but I think it really is about the experience. That's how Web3 can win as a community. And that's why I'm so excited for this hackathon, where we have so many developers building and defining this new experience on Filecoin. So now I'm going to talk a bit more about different kind of Web2 style interaction and opportunity in that space. As mentioned, Filecoin is a platform, it's a protocol, so clients might need to find the miners to enter into a deal. So this could be inefficient to start, but right now we're seeing very exciting and promising sign where you have miners, notaries bringing very reputable clients to the Filecoin network. But there's lots of room for building applications to improve the whole user experience. New deal matching platform can emerge, as I mentioned earlier. Filecoin can be thought of as an Airbnb for cloud services, but it's also a lot more than that, because you can see many Airbnbs or deal matching platform emerging on the Filecoin network, many job boxes, many Google Clouds, and so on and so forth. And the next step would be could be defining like now that you have this matching services and platform, miner reputation and ratings become a thing, because as a client, how do I know which miners I should choose? There are more than 2,000 miners on the Falcon network today. So and the next step would be potentially defining grades of storage services, right? Like just like hotels, right? Like you have like 3-star hotel, 5-star hotel, and different kinds of ranking. So like this could be a precursor to commoditize like cloud storage, right? This is where we draw like inspiration from crude oil, defining different kinds of grades, right? Then now you can have like exchanges on cloud resources that can emerge on the Filecoin economy. So another opportunity from a more traditional kind of sense would be, so Falcon miners have lots of storage capacity, and then they also have lots of compute resources that sit next to their storage capacity. This is really, really powerful. So this whole co-location of storage and compute, we did a pilot with Live here and Falcon co-mining, which is very successful. And then we also doing grants during this hackathon to support more application that is built in the intersection of these two ecosystems. And I think with compute close to the storage, analytics become like a pretty straightforward thing. Less straightforward than it sounds, but it become a natural thing. And then we can even store algorithms on Filecoin. It doesn't have to be just data, right? You can store like the computation on Filecoin as well. We will talk about it in a moment. And we also saw many of the Filecoin miners offering stars and GPU as a service. And I think the next big thing that's happening pretty quickly right now is all the caching and retrieval services on top of the storage that are being stored on Filecoin. Next opportunity, which is also pretty big and also quite standard, data as a complex and sophisticated economy, data becomes really key. So there's lots of room for data services to emerge, and then like financial services as well, because like miners need collateral, clients need Filecoin for their payments. And if you look back at the history of finance, right, like managing risk and providing liquidity and reducing uncertainty has always been the demand for finance, financial products. And in the case of Filecoin, it's even more, the demand is even stronger, because Filecoin token, it's both it's also used in as a production capital. So like it's useful for miners and clients to be able, and other participants to be able to be shielded from token volatility risk. And financial and data services kind of go hand in hand, right? With like better network analytics infrastructure, this will enable even more sophisticated, interesting financial application to emerge on the Falcon network. So we talk about this kind of more traditional Web2 common kind of like business model and opportunities, which I think each of them are really big. It's really big. I think Falcon also brings a pretty unique and new building block to the whole Web3 ecosystem. And this is under, it's not fully realized and appreciated because the network is so real. We go through some of this new opportunity in a moment, but I would like to first talk about, to revisit what are some elements of Web3, right? Privacy and ownership, transparency and openness, permissionless participation, community governance, being able to compose different building blocks to allow for emergence, right? Because Falcon is a layer 1, there's lots of room for different kinds of protocol and project to emerge on the basic building blocks that Falcon provides. And personally, I think Web3 is a lot about novel interactions and new business models that really change how we interact with like each other, with like assets and so on and so forth. And we look at some of these like interesting, like successful areas within like the Web3 ecosystem. If you look back at DeFi, right, it first came up, I think it was mentioned back in 2015, but and during the 2017 ICO boom, lots of dApp and DeFi projects started to emerge. And then you have the launch of Compound, Uniswap late 2018, then you had the DeFi summer last year. So what are the lessons or takeaway that we can learn from this like past trajectory of our broader Web3 ecosystem? So I think there were many dApp before, but some of them may be a bit complex. And I think like DeFi is a relative leverage the building block that Ethereum provides by doing some relatively simple operations. And then there are many protocols that emerge on top of the underlying layer 1. And each of them provides different building blocks such that so that leads to like an exponential growth of the ecosystem. Next would be NFT, which has been pretty popular lately. So it started, I think, even earlier in 2017, people talk about digital collectibles and so on. I think ERC 721 was defined as a standard. Then you have CryptoKitty, which is like a big success and lots of attention and awareness was raised around NFTs. And then you have this whole Cambrian explosion of like many NFT projects. And then we have the boom that we saw like last year and this year. So I think some of the takeaway here is the importance of defining a standard and some reference implementation and some proof of concept will go a super long way. And I think like protocols and marketplaces still find their product market fit relatively early. So what are the building blocks that really Falcon bring to the table? So I would like to share with you this diagram that we used to talk about. We call that the Dataverse. Let's first look at this whole data flow at the top here. I call it data supply chain. And I think it's very common in the Web2 world today. I think you might take a different form in the Web3 world. There's lots of opportunity here to explore. So the data gets produced and then data get refined and then it gets curated. And then value generation even happens, and there's some value attribution. One of our favorite example would be Bloomberg, right? Like lots of the data on Bloomberg, they are not private, they're actually public. And then like Bloomberg mines them, curate them into a terminal, and then they sell them, right? This is a pretty mature business model in Web2, but I think there's lots of room to do something different and better in Web3. And then we look back at our stack. I think like IPFS is a content address web. Everybody can upload data to the IPFS network. And what Falcon brings to the table, I think there are two unique value propositions. One is the scale and volume, right? You have more than 1 or 2 petabyte of a useful storage being added to the network as capacity every hour. And this is going to increase with the upgrade that's coming next month, Hyperdrive. And the next thing is, as mentioned earlier, the blockchain will come around checking on the storage on the network every single day. So like so that you know that your data that's being stored exists every day. That generates a proof, right? So before Falcon introduced like a user-defined smart contract, I think there's some pragmatic thing that we can do as a community. I think like a bridge layer could be interesting, right? Like you bridge these storage states, whether the data is stored and so on and so forth through an oracle to other Web3 ecosystem. And then you can have the business logic that lives in some kind of smart contract platform. I think anything for the top 2 boxes, these are just reference kind of how they might emerge. I think there are many different ways of achieving this that people are exploring. And we did see lots of like collaboration, integration with like Web3 projects, Chainlink integrates with Filecoin to bring like decentralized storage oracles. So now people can, like as we mentioned earlier, now you have oracles can relay the storage states on Filecoin to enable new applications that sit on other smart contract platform. And Lighthouse bridging the Falcon and Ethereum. And then also Textile released this collaboration offering free storage for like all the new developers building application with Filecoin. And I'm going to share some ideas that could be interesting to explore. Given this kind of like to define like new Web3 experience and define like new Web3 protocols. So the first one is data bounties, right? Like so smart contracts can put together funds to fund the storage of a particular CID. CID is just an ID of some storage that's being stored on the IPFS and Falcon network. And funds can only be paid out when there's a proof that this data, this CID has indeed been stored on the Falcon network. And this is like a building block for many other things like data DAOs, right? DAOs can now be formed around data that a common cares about. Members join by proving that they have stored some data or they have contributed to a pool that fund this storage, right? It could be Wikipedia, it could be like the Internet Archive, it could be things with Schwab Foundation, it could be anything. And with these two building blocks, then you can have like storage insurance, commodity futures around like cloud storage itself, right? After this like different kinds of grading that we talk about, then you can repair miners, for example, right? If data get lost. By the way, Falcon has very strong penalty. If data gets lost, there's a very penalty on the protocol itself against that kind of outages. But let's say some data get lost, right? Like people can put out a bounty to ask to incentivize miners to repair that piece of data. There are even more. So NFTs, right? Like NFT is it's a really amazing ecosystem. And I think but they have their problem on its. There are some problem areas for improvement as well. And observation here is that I think every DUI ID on Filecoin can be considered an NFT because if you think of NFT as a unique representation of the underlying content, and where's the value of the NFT? It could be in a trading and exchange, but at the end of the day, it's in the content itself, right? This opened the door to like persistent NFTs, and then like this also give people a stronger incentive because now your incentive align with maintaining the content on a network. So this paved the way for setting up the metaverse. You can create VR content, games, 3D printing models, and many, many more. And with this kind of content first NFTs, it's a very natural question to ask, how can we do better in terms of value attribution? Because that's like one of the pretty common criticisms today. So remember we saw the IPFS CID network, right? There's a network of content that is stored on Filecoin, right? And this creates room to define new standards and protocols of like what is a node, what is an edge, how does value really flow in this kind of content network? And I think there's lots of interesting experiment that will emerge. And then we talk about you can put algorithm on Falcon as well. Each CID can be an algorithm, and that can be stored on Falcon. When you have compute and data, you generate more data, and then you have a network of like value and data on the Falcon network. So overall, I think like as a layer one protocol, at very early stage of the ecosystem, I think there's a lot of room for layer two protocols that leverage the Falcon unique building blocks and fill in the gap from the layer one to the application to provide new experiences, right? Like perpetual storage protocol, like store one and pay one and store forever. You can see like many of this emerging on the Falcon network. You can have data protocol, data mining with like a token, for example, content delivery protocol, and more alternative incentive for people to use the Falcon network to upload data to use Web3. It's not just about Falcon, it's to bring more participant into Web3. And this incentive may not be financial all the time, it could be social, right? Like, why would you upload photo to Facebook when Facebook was launched? Sometimes it's that social incentive. So even this kind of social app on the Falcon network is also pretty interesting to create this kind of alternative incentives. So with like only 6 to 7 months into the network's launch, I think Falcon ecosystem is exploding with like many applications building on the network with new infrastructure, with many accelerators, ecosystem funds, investing in the startups and founders in the ecosystem. So some question I often ask myself, because as I'm thinking about looking at this new project that are emerging, given where we are, I think we're really lucky as a builder in Web3 because there's lots of room to decide what we are building, right? Whether we are building application, a product or a service, a platform, a protocol or a standard, or even we are building or defining an entirely new industry. So we should constantly think about where we are positioning ourselves as we're hacking our projects, and then see like a roadmap and a business plan and business model down the line. And it's also important, personally, I think like Web3, a lot of that is about new interactions. And with these building blocks, that the underlying technology provides, right? What new interactions can we enable? How can we find product market fit? So these are the questions that we should ask ourselves as we hack on projects over the weekend. So just to summarize some key takeaways, I think like Filecoin is really uniquely positioned to support both Web 2 and Web 3 use cases and make blockchain mainstream and useful. And there are immense opportunities in building layer 2 protocols on top of Filecoin platforms, products, and so on. And I think business model is really key, and there are many areas that the community can explore. And I hope some of my sharing can give you guys some ideas. Lastly, I think spread the word, grow the community, grow the pie together. I think for blockchain to be, for Web3 to go mainstream, we have to have this win-win mindset, and we'll come together to build a future that we want to see. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Thank you so much for your attention.
Amazing. That was a super comprehensive and incredible overview of what's possible. Like, I'm curious, like, is there something quick and actionable that you can advise the teams on for this weekend that they can just kind of get started to see how this would work, and then over time expand it to be the broader sort of fully developed idea? Like, how do you think about what people can do this weekend?
Yeah, so I think building a POC of like I think even for the data bounties and data DAOs, I think this is something that like with the bridge provided by Textile, you can develop something like over the weekend, and then with the Chainlink bridge as well, you can explore some of this new interaction as well. I think like it's all pretty open. The resources are out there, and then I feel like sometimes we can build the experience first, and then we can figure out what's missing in the technical stack afterwards as well. Because at the end of the day, I think Web3 similar to Filecoin is about delivering that experience.
So I'm curious, like, does the answer or does anything change if you're designing something for developers specifically instead of and consumers or everyday users?
I think business model and so on is like a very interesting topic personally. I think like there are lots of traditional Web2 models, but I think like even in Web3, I think like there are lots of new like paradigm, right? It's about building a community. Like let's say you're building a developer tool, I think like open sourcing some of this work and then like building a community around it, and then having like governance and this kind of DAO kind of format could be a very interesting model. And also even for other stuff, right? Like as I mentioned earlier, like are we building an application, a product, a protocol, standard, or an industry, right? This offer very different incentives. And then like I think we are all in this exploratory phase. So I think we don't need to rush into like thinking about what is our immediate monetization path for monetization, but we always have that in mind, because the key really is growing the market, bringing in more user, growing the base, and then the rest will follow pretty naturally.